Iran launches a missile attack at a U.S. airbase in Qatar, and late on Monday, President Trump announces a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. Could this signal the end of the crisis? Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. The crisis in the Middle East took another dramatic turn on Monday, with Iran firing missiles at a U.S. airbase in Qatar. And then, late on Monday, President Trump announced a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. Joining us now from our newsroom is Jim Spellman. Jim, what can you tell us about these developments?
On his Truth Social platform, U.S. President Donald Trump wrote, in part, "It has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire in approximately 6 hours from now, when Israel and Iran have wound down and completed their in-progress final missions. For 12 hours, at which point the war will be considered ended." And he wrote, "Upon the 24th hour, an official end to the 12-day war will be saluted by the world." And he wrote, "This is a war that could have gone on for years and destroyed the entire Middle East, but it didn't and never will." Trump seems to imply that Iran will stop its attacks first for 12 hours, and then Israel will stop its attacks for 12 hours. So we're still awaiting details on how exactly this would work. Trump's announcement comes just hours after Iran launched an attack targeting the Al Udeid airbase outside Doha. That's the forward headquarters for U.S. Central Command. The attack in retaliation for the U.S. attacks on Iranian nuclear facilities over the weekend. There are no reports of injuries at this time. In a statement, Iran's armed forces said the number of missiles used matched the number of bombs the U.S. used in its attack over the weekend, and notes the base targeted is far from urban infrastructure and residential areas and posed no threat to Qatar. The attack was seen as a way for Iran to retaliate without escalating the conflict, and Trump indicated earlier Monday that the U.S. would not retaliate for Iran's attacks, setting the stage for Trump's ceasefire announcement. Note, please, that we do not at this point have confirmation from Israel or Tehran, and no information yet about what might come next, whether negotiations over Iran's nuclear program will resume. President Trump slated to depart for the Netherlands and a NATO summit on Tuesday. Anand?
Thanks, Jim. That's CGTN's Jim Spellman reporting there. Well, there is much to discuss, so let's get to our panel. Joining me here in studio is Jamal Abdi. He is president of the National Iranian-American Council. With us, too, is Dan Arbell. He's a veteran of the Israeli Foreign Service and currently scholar in residence at the Center for Israeli Studies at American University. Also joining us from Boston is Kaveh Afrasiabi. He is an Iranian-American political scientist and author, specializing in Iran's foreign and nuclear affairs. And also with us here in the studio is Edmund Ghareeb. He is a Middle East scholar and analyst. Welcome to all of you to the show. Kaveh Afrasiabi, let me start with you. Let's start on this latest development. Late on Monday, President Trump announcing a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. As our reporter Jim Spellman just told us, there's been no independent confirmation from either Iran or Israel on the ceasefire. But what do you make of this announcement?
Well, I assume that we have to take it seriously because it's the United States president, with some details about the timing and the start of this ceasefire. So there's a lot of unknown. However, huge sigh of relief for both populations in Israel and Iran who have been suffering under this grievous conflict, as well as for the rest of the world community. Hopefully there won't be any hitches, and this will be implemented immediately, and will be followed by meaningful diplomatic interaction among the parties. But I was a little surprised. I think that it comes in the aftermath of Israel and US's failure to achieve any of their objectives in Iran. It's been basically a failed mission for Israel. And Iran hit Israel back really hard, and Israel could not sustain that kind of, relentless attack by Iran in its, small size. whereas Iran had a larger patience for this kind of warfare. So I think that there's a momentum now for return to peace, and we should be rather elated about it.
All right, let me get the view from Dan Arbell. Dan, President Trump made this announcement on his social media platform, Truth Social. Part of what he had to say, if I could just recap that, he said, it has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a ceasefire. There will be complete and total ceasefire in approximately 6 hours from now when Israel and Iran have wound down and completed their in-progress final missions for 12 hours, at which point the war will be considered ended. How do you see this?
So yeah, I think it's definitely good news that Trump's announcement is good news, and hopefully there will be a ceasefire going into effect tomorrow morning, Middle East time. However, between now and tomorrow morning, there's still several hours left, and anything can happen during those hours. And it's known that when ceasefires are announced and they've not been implemented yet, the parties take steps to kind of get what's called a victory photo or a victory image. And so I do expect that tonight we'll see some barrages of rockets and missiles and drones from Iran into Israel. We'll see Israeli attacks into Iran until the last moment when the ceasefire actually enters. But I think that this is a first step, and remains to be seen how the parties come out of it. And after this ceasefire, how do we put things back on track, and how does the international community work to ensure that this kind of that a permanent solution is found? I think that contrary to what Kaveh has said, Israel's achievements have been remarkable. Degrading Iran's nuclear program, destroying 50% of its missile capability, hitting its senior command, nuclear scientists, and so on and so forth. Many military achievements, and now it's time for diplomacy. So I do expect to see in the coming days more out of the United States, and perhaps if the United States cannot do it directly, other third parties that may step in and bring to greater calm in the region. I also hope that this is an opportunity to end the war in Gaza for good and get all the Israeli hostages out of there after 626 days of war in Gaza.
Jamal, Abdi, what do you think led to this announcement by the president late on Monday afternoon? It came as a bit of a surprise, especially after we heard earlier today that Iran had attacked a U.S. military base in Qatar.
I think the Iranian response is what led to this. The Iranians calibrated this carefully to not cross President Trump's red lines. This was coordinated. I mean, I think I've heard people say that the Iranians have coordinated these symbolic strikes with the U.S. in some cases closer than Israel has coordinated strikes with the U.S. So I think that really allowed for de-escalation to happen and for this agreement to go forward. I think that was the intention.
Okay, Edmund Ghareeb?
Well, clearly it was a well-calculated, well-calibrated attack that Iran launched against Lodayr base in Qatar. This has brought some criticism from some of the Gulf countries, the Arab countries, but I think this was a message that Iran wanted to send. First, they wanted to say to the U.S., we are capable of hitting you. This is one of your largest bases in the region, and we are capable of hitting that base. So basically, they were sending a message to their own population that they have achieved something. They're sending a message to Washington also that we have the capability to do a lot of damage to you as well. And clearly, there was some coordination before, because you do not reach an agreement and bring an end to talk about ceasefire within less than 24 hours or less. So clearly, I think there's been communication going on between the U.S. and Israel, between the U.S. and Iran, whether directly or indirectly, we don't know. But this is, of course, my speculation, my analysis, is that I think there were contacts and they were preparing for this. Yesterday, President Trump was breathing fire and brimstone. Today, he's the peacemaker. So I think this is really a very well-calculated effort. I think everybody is in big trouble. The Israelis are in trouble. Iran is in trouble. Trump is facing trouble even from the MAGA audience, and I think many countries in the world are very much concerned. So I think they're all under pressure, and that's what they're trying to do. Let's hope, as Dan mentioned, let's hope that this really works, and this will bring an end to the conflict, not only between Iran and Israel, but also in Gaza and the West Bank.
Okay. Kaveh Afrasiabi, do you think there was a connection between that Iranian attack and what President Trump announced late this afternoon?
Most likely, because as the other speaker said, this was symbolic, but also sent a strong message that if Iran wanted to, can simultaneously hit several U.S. bases as well as some of its naval ships and inflict serious damage. So I think that worked as an effective deterrent, and the U.S. got the message together with the fact that, look at the devastation in Israel. Israel's economy has been shut down, its borders closed, people are fleeing, and hundreds of buildings damaged, and military installations, scientific and so on, are targeted, and Iran's missiles are basically having a free reign over Israeli skies. So, $500 billion plus economic damages to the Israeli economy, and as I said, the Israelis couldn't take this much longer. And that was one of the factors. However, there was a confluence of factors that, in my opinion, led to this ceasefire, ranging from Trump's own domestic pressure to the inconclusiveness of the military operations and Israel's inability to achieve its goals, because Iran's nuclear program is still intact. It has still got its 60% enrichment. It's still got its centrifuges. And the Iranians are very, very upset at the IAEA, and they're not going to be very pleasant toward the IAEA and inspectors in the near future. I can assure you that, just as I assured you the other night that Iran's response to the U.S. will be restrained and somewhat cosmetic.
Right. Dan Arbell, Kaveh Afrasiabi just used the term there, inconclusive, talking about where the conflict is, the point at it is right now. Will it be seen that way in Israel as well, that this didn't really come to an end?
I think Israel's objectives when it started this on June 13th, I think most of the objectives that Israel has sought out to achieve were achieved. And as I've said, the nuclear program is severely damaged. The ballistic missile program is severely damaged. Israel's achieved air superiority in the Tehran skies, in the skies of Iran. There's no opposition whatsoever. Nobody's interrupting dozens of Israeli warplanes that are flying in the skies of Iran on a daily basis. And Israel's hit targets throughout the country from north to south, and strategic locations and military installations. And so I think that really Israel got what it wanted to achieve, and certainly it's time to move on past that. There's a need to be sure, to ensure, however, that Iran does not have the nuclear program anymore, that there is no Iran nuclear option anymore. And I think that's going to be the focus of Israeli objectives in the coming weeks and months, to ensure that the international community, is kept under wraps and is not allowed to develop nuclear weapons, and therefore that's going to be something that needs to be looked at, and this is not far from over in that sense. And only when there will be confirmation that there's no Iranian nuclear option, I think only then it will suffice from Israel's standpoint.
Jamal, Abdi, do you believe that Iran's nuclear program has been completely degraded? We talked about this on Sunday, and you made the point that Iran has the know-how, they have the knowledge on how to build weapons. And then we heard today there was increasing doubts about what this raid by the United States, the bombing of these 3 nuclear sites, had achieved. We heard it from the United States radio network, NPR, which cited experts as saying that, well, we don't know whether these sites were completely destroyed. The Financial Times had a story on its front page saying there's about just over 400 kilograms of enriched uranium. We don't know where that is. They can't account for it.
That's right. That's right. And that's why I think we all hopefully welcome this ceasefire, but Donald Trump is the master showman. This is sort of a made-for-TV bombing and ceasefire. He got to break out the B-2 bombers and drop the world's largest weapons on Iran, but it's unlikely that he fully destroyed the program. I don't think anybody besides Trump initially is saying that. Even J.D. Vance is acknowledging that there is this 60% enriched uranium that's just floating around somewhere. There are elements of the program that Iran removed from these sites. There's an entire facility that actually Iran was going to bring online. It hadn't yet brought it online, so the IAEA didn't have access to it. We don't know what is in that facility. So I think really we are back to square one. There was a bombing campaign for a week and a half. The U.S. dropped the bombs. But if the goal was to remove Iran's nuclear capability, that was not accomplished. And so I think that actually this is a brief reprieve for all sides. But I expect that the type of rhetoric that was coming out of Netanyahu and Israel, the talk about regime change and destabilizing Iran, I think that's very much still on the agenda. And hopefully the ceasefire actually holds. But I think there is a Cold War that threatens to become hot again very soon.
Edmund Ghareeb, on the question of where it goes to as far as the inspections are concerned, as far as Iran's nuclear program is concerned, the IAEA, which is the UN's nuclear watchdog, says it wants its inspectors to go back in. Let's listen to what the IAEA had to say. Let's watch.
First of all, we must return to the negotiating table. And for that, allow IAEA inspectors, the guardians on our behalf of the NPT, to go back to Iran's nuclear sites and account for the stockpiles of uranium, including, most importantly, the 400 kilograms enriched to 60%.
Well, there we have the Director General of the IAEA also raising questions about these hundreds of kilograms of enriched uranium. Question is, he wants the inspectors to go back in. Do you think Iran is going to continue to cooperate with the IAEA?
Iran was very critical of the IAEA and its leader because of the stance that he took. Yeah. There have been hints that, in fact, some of the people who worked with the IAEA were involved or informed, that got information to the Israelis about the targets inside Iran. Now, how accurate, I don't know. But clearly, I think this is a very important development. I think that the Iranians have made it clear that they have the right to, to have a nuclear program for peaceful purposes. And they said they were not going to retreat from that. It's generally believed that they had already moved a lot of equipment as well as the enriched uranium to safer places. Yeah. But again, we don't know enough. And the point that you mentioned earlier about the damage, the amount of damage. There are some who believe that a great deal of damage was done, but then there are others who say it's not. It wasn't as bad as we had thought. So I think this is a very important period, because for the Israelis have always said Iran will not be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. That's what President Trump has said. The Iranians have said that they have the right to enrich uranium for peaceful purposes, and they were supportive. They were willing to accept the International Atomic Energy Agency to be coming in and out. But now I think this is really going to be one of the hardest questions, is would Iran be allowed to enrich uranium at a lower level? I mean, Witkoff, two weeks ago, said that he favors the idea of maybe allowing Iran to have somewhere between 3 and 5%, which I think many in the U.S. would have welcomed. Yeah. However, the Israelis were very much opposed to that. So are we going to see a change? Mm-hmm. Netanyahu was saying today that we are very close to achieving our objectives. Yet the chief of staff was saying something else. He said we have a lot of targets still in Iran. So I think this.
Well, there's still 12 hours to go before this. Yeah.
Exactly. So, but that's this is a very important. That's why I think this is what we're seeing is very significant. Yeah. But I think until we have an agreement, mm-hmm. you cannot be certain of what the end's going to be.
Okay, there's a lot there. I want to get Dan Arbell into this conversation. Dan, firstly, let me ask you about these this enriched uranium that can't be accounted for. What do you make of that? I mean, does Israel know anything about that, or where it is, or where it got to?
I think first of all, there's regarding the damage that has occurred as a result of the U.S. bombings in the 3 nuclear facilities. There's still not a full assessment, evaluation of what actually was destroyed and what capacity does Iran still have. Then also, there's the big question of the enriched uranium and where it was shipped to, and I personally don't know where it was shipped to, and I don't know if the Israeli intelligence knows, or perhaps it does have some hints or some ideas, but certainly this is something that's going to be in the focus of attention. You know, once a ceasefire is in place and once efforts to get negotiations started over a new deal with Iran, then certainly the enriched uranium issue, the remaining enriched uranium will be a focus of conversation, of attention. Those who, however, are talking about, Iran, rushing to a bomb after all that it has suffered, with the remaining enriched uranium that it has or it doesn't have, it's not really sure how many quantities, and then still getting to a bomb is something, it's not a realistic scenario anytime soon. It's something that's going to take years and years for Iran to recover its capabilities, its ability to, to renew its military nuclear program. So certainly it's not something for tomorrow morning in terms of action-oriented and preventing it, because it's not going to happen anytime soon, but it certainly needs to be part of a future agreement that will end Iran's quest for military nuclear capability.
Yeah, okay, Dan, you talk about a future agreement. There is Israel's position still zero enrichment. That's the bottom line.
Yes, it is. Zero enrichment is Israeli policy, stated policy.
Kaveh Afrasiabi, diplomatically, where does this go?
Who knows? I mean, diplomacy is under a thick cloud of uncertainty right now, because you got to look at this thing from Iran's vantage. The Iranians are extremely upset at what has happened. They look at themselves as the victims of naked aggression, rightly so. A lot of them are calling for the expulsion of IAEA and Iran exiting from the NPT. And I really don't see how that pressure on the government can be withstood. There's a very likelihood that after this naked, blunt aggression by Israel and the United States, Iran will go full nuclear. Iran will put aside all its hesitations and will go full nuclear, so that next time this happens, Iran will have nuclear deterrence against this aggressive Zionist state. So I think that's what's in the card, most likely. In terms of diplomacy and coming to some sort of peace agreement and so forth, I don't see that happening, not in the immediate future, because the Iranians are too upset.
Okay, Jamal, Abdi, what do you see as the future relationship between Iran and the IAEA and Iran's commitments to the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty?
This is the million-dollar question. And I would say right now, it does not look positive. I think the single greatest determining factor in whether a state gets a nuclear weapon is not enrichment, it's not delivery vehicles, it is intent. It is intent. And Iran has been under the radar for 30 years of supposedly pursuing a nuclear weapon. If Iran wanted a nuclear weapon, Iran would have a nuclear weapon after 30 years. They could have bought one, they could have developed one secretly. The intent has not been there, and that is what U.S. intelligence says. That intention, I fear, there is a lot of pressure for it to go in the other direction. This is a major source of leverage for Iran, and I think that, what Donald Trump has done and the Israelis have done, they've put the most bullish estimates are 2 to 5 years on the clock before Iran could potentially be in a position to build a nuclear weapon. Compare that to what the Obama administration secured with the JCPOA, the Iran deal, 15 years on the clock under full inspection. I don't think Iran is in a position now to want to deliver that amount of transparency, given what has now happened, given how their commitments under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, their commitments to the IAEA have been completely violated.
Right, but for that to happen, for it to withdraw from all those kinds of inspections, it would have to end its commitment to the NPT, right?
That's right. Yeah. That's right. I think that is very much on the table, and I think that is what Trump and Netanyahu. I don't think that there's a plan for that. Yeah. Like I said, they're back at square one, where Iran still has the materials, very much now has a different intent potentially.
Okay, Edmund, what's your view on where it goes?
I think one of the things that, if I understood your question, basically, I think what we're seeing now is that Iran's going to be under pressure internally to develop a nuclear weapon after this experience. I think if we go back and take a look at what happened in Libya, when Gaddafi gave up his nuclear project, what ended up happening is that he was destroyed. North Korea, however, when they built a nuclear capability, we don't see any attacks. That's one point. The second point, there was something very interesting that was said by Medvedev, the former president of Russia, yesterday. He said that there were several countries that offered Iran nuclear weapons. I wonder where this came from. Which countries offered? Because he didn't say that Russia did. But which countries offered? So basically, this is going to be a very complex issue, and that's why I think this is at the heart of the whole issue. Will they be able to reach an agreement, an understanding? If they are able to, then I think that would be great news for everyone. But at the same time, I think there are still some serious difficulties down the road.
But would it be acceptable to Iran, Edmund, if part of that agreement is no nuclear enrichment?
As of now, I don't think so.
No uranium enrichment, yeah.
No, I don't think they would be willing to agree to that.
Okay, and we are going to have to leave it there. Thank you to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu.